Hello, folks. Thank you once again for joining me. So, in my series of discussing AWS security services, there is a big elephant in the room, which is WAF, AWS Web Application Firewall. And what it does is that it protects your web application from common exploit. So, I want to quickly go through some things that we need to know about WAF. WAF is a layer 7 application firewall, and why standard firewalls and security groups block traffic based on basic network parameters like IP address or port numbers. WAF intercept HTTP and HTTPS and inspect them, go inside and inspect them whether they are malicious or not. Now, before I move further, there is something I want us to look at, which is that very statement that talks about standard firewalls and security group. Now, when you look at AWS services very well, security group is something we use to define traffic that can go in and outside of our EC2 instance. So that particular feature only works at that EC2 or network, layer. Then when you look at what we call NACO, which is NACL, that works at the layer of a subnet. So when you have a traffic coming, the first thing is that WAF is like a gatekeeper. It looks at the traffic, the HTTP and HTTPS traffic to see if they are malicious or not, then pass it down. Then it gets to the security group, inspects the network, that whether it's legitimate for that network, and pass it down to the EC2 instance, which is security group. So I just want us to know that apart from WAF, whatever is happening at this the subnet group and the EC2 instance layer, they are network or like level 3 or level 4 firewalls. Okay, so let me go to something I call the anatomy of web application web access control list. Now, web access control list is like a container through which we administer WAF rules. So let's just know that when a request matches a rule criteria, WAF stop checking further down the chain and immediately execute the designated rule action. So, for instance, when WAF check for a particular, check a particular traffic and the rule is passed, it's just allow it to go to the downstream. So I want to talk about the rules and the priority now. What are those rules that are common here? Allow means that pass the request clean through to your application. Block, drop the request immediately, and return a customizable error page, maybe HTTP 443, forbidding and what have you. But what I want us to pay attention into is the vocabulary, the verb. You allow, block, count. Now, in the case of count, increment a metric counter and attach a text metadata tag called label to the request, then pass it to the next rule. This is where useful, and this is highly useful for safely tested out new rules in production without breaking traffic. So now, this is where it's more or less like a custom, whereby you can say, okay, this, pass it if this happens. Then we have the last one, which is a challenge or capture. Runs a silent, non-intrusive, background JavaScript check, challenge to verify the legitimate browser. Now, what does that mean? It means that there is something that could pop up in your browser and say, okay, if you're a human, check the box. That's what we call challenge or capture. So these are the ways through which we can, define rules and prioritization in WAF environment. So rule types. Rules can be AWS managed rules. These are right out of the box. They are native to AWS environment. And it could be custom rules. Custom rules is like you are writing some religious patterns that whatever match these and these, this is what should happen. right out of the box or managed rules, they are rules that most of the time they address what we call OWASP top 10, like SQL injection, like broken authentication, like cross-site scripting. These are rules that are there, AWS managed, maintained, so that such things that are similar, traffic that have the same signature that we can liken to these vulnerabilities, known vulnerabilities, they are blocked. And yeah. So the other thing I want us to talk about here is advanced boot control and fraud protection. Now, this is another feature within WAF that kind of, leverage some sophisticated scripting that disguise. Okay, let me put it this way. Modern scanning leverages sophisticated script that disguise themselves as legitimate browsers. So in the world today, we have a lot of, bad actors that are leveraging some capability in scripting to disguise as if they are legitimate user or browser that they're traversing an application. So what WAF does is that there is a built-in capability within your WAF system that can detect those bots, you understand me now, and make sure that they don't thwart their actions. So one thing you have to notice that there are good and bad bots. Good bots are for like Google. Google use some bot to do some like check website and stuff like that. But bad bot, they are ones that they are used to scrap maybe bad actors to scrape a website. So you want to be able to classify both, along this line, bad and good, and make sure you know how to configure your environment to allow for some and disallow for others. So yeah, so that is that about boot control. And now when you talk about core capabilities, like I just want to recap, I give what I've said, yes, is core capability, but I just want to recap in a more streamlined manner. So number one core capability is that WAF, AWS WAF, is a fine-grained layer 7 HTTP or HTTPS request filtering tool for our firewall. Number two is that AWS manage rule groups and marketplace ecosystem. Minimize operational management overhead through AWS managed rules. So basically what this says is that take advantage of AWS managed rules. These are standard, battle tested, battle proof rule set that you can just, implement in your environment right away. Advanced boot control and automated fraud protection. Deploy advanced application security using AWS WAF boot control and account takeover prevention. All these things are within your WAF environment. It's very important that you know that they exist and what they do. Then when you're implementing them, you know that it's the function they can bring or the capability you can bring to your workload. Distributed web, ACL association and architectural abstraction. Now, centralized rule management using web access control list. A single web access control list can be bound directly to multiple AWS resources type across your architecture. Yes, so that I was explaining that your web ACL is like a container through which you administer rules in your WAF environment. Yeah, so business problems. When you have this, because it's protecting your application at layer 7, application downtime via common web vulnerabilities are prevented. That is one business problem you want to solve with this. You don't want downtime. You don't want a common vulnerability found in your environment. Automated scraping and inventory hoarding. So defend your business logic against automated threats, both control flags and automated scanners. So you want to protect your workload or your application layer against all these, insecure practices. You want to do that. That is another business problem that you are solving with a WAF. Number three is compliance gap and geo-blocking enforcement. Now, simplify geo-blocking compliance demand. There are compliance requirement that says, okay, if you're operating in North America and there is no need for maybe somebody from Europe to be able to maybe access your website or application or whatever, so you can enforce those geo-blocking, geo-matching conditions within your WAF environment. Best practices in production. Strict token validation and rule action, yeah. So prevent accidental user disruption when deploying new web ACL modification by initializing rules in count mode. Monitor your traffic logs via CloudWatch metrics to analyze the rule impact. Once you confirm that its legitimate traffic isn't getting caught in that filter, transition the rule action from count to block or to change. So count mode is like dry mode. You can effect some changes, but you want to check and see if it actually worked the way you expected before you make a more drastic point like block or challenge. Centralized posture rollout via AWS Firewall Manager. So if you want to roll out your scale web defenses across multiple account environment by using a AWS Firewall Manager. So that is what you use to auto and enforce your WAF configurations. So your WAF configuration should be done through AWS Firewall Manager. Custom response customization and graceful error handling. Make sure you do your error handling properly. Make it grateful, make it understandable in such a way that it will not be a security risk again. So that is very important when you are putting this into production. Log sampling, full logging, S3 bucket, full lifecycle archiver. Now, this is another thing that is very common with other AWS security services. Make sure that your logging of this activity is properly done with a full S3 bucket lifecycle management. That shows that if the log is maybe has exceeded some time limit, you can move it to less expensive storage tier, like a S3 Glacier Deep Archive. Yeah, so that is the end of a WAF. WAF is a very it's a large stuff. It's a large topic, and during my hands-on, which I will include a hands-on video, which I will link at the bottom of this video. So I will do more elaboration while I bring in hands-on project that can guide you into deploying within your workload. Once again, thank you.